Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the stars through the large front window. The ship moved through space at high speed, heading toward the Kepler system where trouble was waiting. He had been a commander in the Earth Defense Fleet for 20 years, and he had never seen anything like this before. The year was 2387, and humans had been part of the Galactic Federation for almost 200 years. During that time, they had made friends with many alien species and learned to live in peace across the galaxy. But now, everything was about to change. The Zephyrian Empire was coming, and they wanted to destroy everything in their path. These aliens were different from the peaceful species that humans had met before. The Zephyrians were warriors who conquered worlds and enslaved entire populations. They had already taken control of 17 star systems, and now they were heading toward Earth. Jack walked through the corridors of his ship, looking at the faces of his crew. Everyone was scared, but they were trying to hide it. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Stone was working at her control station, checking the ship's weapons and defenses. She had been with Jack for 5 years, and he trusted her completely. "Sir, we're getting reports from the outer colonies," Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. "The Zephyrian fleet is bigger than we thought. Our scouts are counting over 400 ships." Jack nodded but did not show his fear. 400 ships against the 47 that Earth could send into battle. The numbers were not good, but he had learned long ago that numbers did not always decide who won a fight. Chief Engineer Pete Adams came onto the bridge, wiping grease from his hands. He had been working for hours to make sure the ship's engines were running at full power. Pete was a good man, the kind of person who would work all night to give his friends a better chance of survival. "The engines are running as well as they can, Commander," Pete said. "But I have to tell you, if we push them too hard during the battle, we might lose power at the worst possible moment." "Do what you can, Pete," Jack replied. "We're going to need every advantage we can get." The bridge was quiet except for the soft sounds of the ship's computers and the low hum of the engines. Jack could feel the weight of command pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. Every person on his ship was depending on him to make the right choices. Every family back on Earth was counting on him to keep them safe. Jack thought about his own family. His wife, Kate, was working as a teacher on Earth, probably trying to keep her students calm while the news reports talked about the coming war. His daughter, Emma, was only 12 years old, and she did not fully understand what was happening. She had asked him before he left if he would be back in time for her birthday. Next month, the other species in the Federation were not being very helpful. The Centaurians had pulled their ships back to defend their own worlds. The vegan collective had voted to try to make peace with the Zephyrians instead of fighting them. Even the Altarians, who had been Earth's closest allies, were suggesting that humans should evacuate their colonies and find somewhere else to live. "Commander, we're getting a message from Admiral Bennett on Earth," said Lieutenant Commander Tony Baker from the communications station. "She wants to speak with you right away." Jack walked to the communication room and activated the holographic display. Admiral Grace Bennett appeared in front of him, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and her face showing the strain of the past few weeks. "Jack, I'm not going to lie to you," Admiral Bennett said. "The situation is worse than we caught. The Zephyrians have some kind of new weapon technology that we've never seen before. They can tear apart the molecular structure of anything they hit. Our shields might not be able to stop it. What about the Federation Council?" Jack asked. "Are they going to send help?" Admiral Bennett shook her head. "The vote was yesterday. They decided that fighting the Zephyrians would be too dangerous for the Federation. They want us to negotiate a surrender." Jack felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them that humans don't surrender," Admiral Bennett replied. "I told them that we would rather die fighting than live as slaves. But Jack, I have to ask you one more time. Are you sure this is the right choice?" "We could evacuate the colonies and find another way." Jack looked at the holographic image of his commander and friend. Grace Bennett had been in the military for 40 years, and she had never backed down from a fight. But he could see the doubt in her eyes. She was afraid that they were sending good people to die for nothing. Admiral, do you remember why we joined the Federation in the first place? Jack asked. It wasn't just for trade or technology. It was because we believed that all intelligent species should be free to choose their own path. If we give up now, we're telling the galaxy that freedom only matters when it's easy to defend. Admiral Bennett was quiet for a long moment. You're right, Jack. I just hate the thought of losing so many good people. So do I, Jack said. But if we don't fight now, we'll lose a lot more people later. The Zephyrians won't stop with Earth. They'll keep conquering until there's nothing left of the Federation. After the communication ended, Jack remained in the small room, staring at the blank wall where the hologram had been. The weight of command felt heavier than ever. In a few hours, he would have to lead his people into a battle that they might not survive. The Zephyrians had better ships, better weapons, and more experience in war than humans had ever faced, but Jack had something that the Zephyrians did not understand. He had the stubborn refusal to give up that seemed to be built into every human heart. He had seen it in soldiers who fought against impossible odds, in scientists who worked for years to solve problems that everyone said were impossible, and in ordinary people who stood up to bullies even when they knew they might lose. Jack walked back to the bridge and looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of human vision, the Zephyrian fleet was coming. They expected to find a species that would surrender when faced with superior force. They expected to add Earth to their list of conquered worlds without much trouble. They were about to learn that humans were different from every other species they had ever met. They were about to discover that some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed hopeless. Jack made a quiet promise to himself, to his family, and to every human who was counting on him. He would not let the Zephyrians reach Earth. He would find a way to stop them, no matter what it cost. The alien invaders had made one big mistake when they chose to threaten humanity. They had awakened something in the human spirit that had been sleeping for too long. The stars seemed to shine brighter as Jack made his vow. In the darkness of space, a small human fleet was preparing to show the galaxy what determination looked like. The battle that would change history was about to begin, and Jack Morrison was ready to lead his people into the unknown. The communication chamber on the UES Defiant filled with blue light as the holographic projectors activated. Jack Morrison stood in the center of the room, watching as 12 different alien species appeared around the virtual table. The Federation Council was meeting to discuss the Zephyrian threat, and Jack could already see the fear in their strange faces. Chancellor Vex of the Altarian Republic spoke first. His body looked like it was made of crystal, and his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Commander Morrison, your species must listen to reason. The Zephyrians have weapons that can destroy matter at the atomic level. Nothing we have can defend against such power. Jack listened quietly as the other council members shared their concerns. The Centaurian delegate, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, explained how the Zephyrians had wiped out an entire star system in less than a day. The representative from the vegan collective, who looked like a giant plant with moving branches, suggested that surrender might be the only way to save lives. The Zephyrians do not simply conquer, said Dr. Ryan Clark, appearing as a hologram from his research station near Jupiter. They harvest the neural networks of intelligent species. They take the brains of their victims and use them to make themselves smarter. Earth has 12 billion people. If they capture our planet, they will become more intelligent than any species in the galaxy. The room fell silent as everyone thought about what that meant. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. The Zephyrians were not just conquerors. They were collectors who wanted to steal the thoughts and memories of every human being alive. Admiral Grace Bennett joined the conversation from Earth Command. Her image flickered slightly because of the distance, but her voice was clear and strong. We've run computer simulations of the battle. Every single one ends with human defeat. The Zephyrians have over 400 ships, and each one is more powerful than our best vessels. Captain Lavra Hayes of the UES Valiant appeared next to Admiral Bennett. Lavra was one of Jack's oldest friends, and they had served together during The border conflicts with space pirates 10 years ago. She looked tired and worried as she spoke. Jack, I've been monitoring the outer colonies with long-range sensors. The Zephyrian ships are using some kind of space-folding technology to move faster than we calculated. They're going to reach the Mars defense grid 3 days earlier than expected. Jack's second-in-command, Commander Alex Turner, stood beside him with a tablet full of battle reports. Alex had been studying the Zephyrian tactics for weeks, trying to find some weakness they could exploit. His face showed the frustration of a man who had found no good answers. "Sir, we've analyzed every battle the Zephyrians have fought," Alex said quietly. "They always use the same strategy. They send their biggest ships first to break enemy defenses, then they use smaller vessels to hunt down survivors. It's worked. Perfectly every time?" Jack nodded, but his mind was working on something else. He had been thinking about the Zephyrian victories, and he had noticed something that everyone else seemed to miss. The alien conquerors had won every battle because their enemies had fought exactly the way they expected. How long did each of their previous battles last? Jack asked. Alex checked his tablet. The longest was 6 hours. Most ended in less than 2. The species they conquered always tried to form defensive lines and wait for the attack. The Zephyrians would overwhelm them with superior firepower and numbers. What about surrender? Jack asked. Did any of the conquered species try to negotiate? All of them, Alex replied. Every species tried to surrender when they realized they couldn't win. The Zephyrians accepted the surrender, then enslaved the survivors anyway. Jack felt something click in his mind. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that refused to give up. They had conquered 17 civilizations by being stronger and smarter than their opponents. But they had never met a species that would rather die than surrender. Chancellor Vex spoke again, his crystal voice filled with urgency. Commander Morrison, you must understand that this is not about bravery or honor. This is about survival. The Zephyrians have quantum-phase weapons that can tear apart the bonds between atoms. They have ships that can fold space and time. They have genetic enhancements that make them stronger and faster than any natural creature. Fighting them is not heroic, it is suicide. The other council members agreed with various sounds and gestures. The vegan collective representative rustled his leaves nervously. The Centauran delegate crossed all 4 of his arms. Even the normally brave Altarians were suggesting that humanity should evacuate Earth and find a new home somewhere else in the galaxy. Jack looked around the virtual table at all the frightened faces. These were the leaders of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they were all terrified of the Zephyrians. They had given up before the battle even started. "You're all missing something important," Jack said, his voice cutting through the worried chatter. The Zephyrians have won every battle because they've fought enemies who thought like military commanders. They've conquered civilizations that used logic and strategy and careful planning, but they've never fought humans. "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Clark. "I mean that humans don't fight wars the way other species do," Jack replied. "We don't always use logic. We don't always follow the rules. When we're backed into a corner, we do things that seem crazy to everyone else. The Zephyrians are expecting us to form defensive lines and wait for them to attack. They're expecting us to surrender when we realize we can't win. They're expecting us to be reasonable?" Admiral Bennett leaned forward in her chair. "Jack, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that the Zephyrians have made one big mistake," Jack said. "They've studied our military tactics, our technology, and our defenses. But they haven't studied what makes humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They don't understand that we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees." Commander Alex Turner looked at Jack with growing understanding. "You're talking about doing something unpredictable." "I'm talking about doing something impossible," Jack corrected. "Something so crazy that the Zephyrians won't see it coming because no reasonable species would ever try it." The council members began talking all at once, their voices mixing together. In a chaos of worry and confusion, Chancellor Vex's crystal voice rose above the others. "Commander Morrison, you cannot risk the entire human species on a desperate gamble. The Federation will not support a suicide mission? Then the Federation can stay out of our way, Jack replied. Humanity didn't ask to join this war, but we're not going to run from it either. The Zephyrians want to enslave 12 billion people and steal their thoughts. That's not going to happen while I'm still breathing. Captain Lavra Hayes spoke up from her position near Mars. Jack, I've served with you for 15 years. I've seen you get out of impossible situations before. If anyone can find a way to beat the Zephyrians, it's you. But you need to tell us what you're planning. Jack looked at his old friend through the holographic display. Lavra had been with him during the Battle of Titan, when pirates had surrounded their small patrol ship and demanded surrender. Jack had rammed their ship into the biggest pirate vessel, and the explosion had scattered the entire enemy fleet. It had been crazy, dangerous, and completely unexpected. It had also worked. I'm planning to show the Zephyrians something they've never seen before, Jack said. I'm going to show them what happens when humans refuse to be reasonable. The Council. Meeting ended with no agreement. The Federation would not send help, but they would not try to stop humanity from fighting either. Jack stood alone in the communication chamber after the holograms disappeared, feeling the weight of command heavier than ever before. In a few hours, he would have to explain his plan to his officers. They would think he was crazy, and they would probably be right. But sometimes crazy was the only option left when everything else had failed. Jack walked back to the bridge, where his crew was waiting for orders. They looked at him with hope and fear, trusting him to find a way to save their world. The Zephyrian fleet was getting closer every minute, and time was running out, but Jack Morrison had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The aliens, who thought they could conquer humanity, were about to learn that some species could not be defeated, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The war room aboard the UES Defiant was filled with tension as Jack Morrison stood before the large holographic display. The room was packed with his senior officers, all of them waiting to hear the plan that might save humanity or destroy them. The blue light from the tactical display cast strange shadows on their worried faces. Captain Roy Martinez had arrived from the U's Guardian an hour ago, his shuttle docking with the Defiant in the darkness of space. Roy was a good man who had fought pirates and smugglers for 20 years, but he had never faced anything like the Zephyrian threat. His weathered face showed the strain of knowing that his ship and crew might not survive the next few days. Captain Susan Bell from the UES Thunderbolt joined them through holographic link, her image flickering slightly as her ship moved through the asteroid field. Susan had been one of the first female captains in the Earth Defense Fleet, and she had earned her position through skill and determination. She looked at Jack with eyes that had seen too many battles. Jack, we're all waiting to hear this miracle plan of yours, Susan said, her voice carrying a mixture of hope and doubt. The Zephyrian fleet will be here in 18 hours. Whatever you're thinking, we need to know now. Jack pointed to the tactical display, which showed the approaching enemy fleet as red dots moving through space. The Zephyrian ships were arranged in perfect formation, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with green energy. Intelligence reports suggested that each ship was alive in some way, grown rather than built, with weapons that could tear apart matter itself. We can't match their firepower, Jack said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he was about to propose. We can't outrun them and we can't hide from them. But we can do something they don't expect. We can use their confidence against them. Commander Nina Rodriguez, the fleet's tactical officer, leaned forward in her chair. Nina had graduated from the academy with top honors in military strategy, and she had studied every major space battle in human history. Her expertise in tactical planning had saved human lives during the border conflicts, but now she looked confused. Sir, what do you mean by using their confidence against them? Nina asked. Jack manipulated the holographic display, showing the positions of the 47 human ships scattered throughout the system. The Zephyrians expect us to form defensive lines around Earth and Mars. They expect us to wait for them to attack, then try to hold them off as long as possible. That's what every other species has done, and it's never worked. So what do we do instead? Asked Captain Roy Martinez. We split our forces into 3 groups and attack them from different directions at the same time, Jack replied. But we're not going to use normal attack patterns. We're going to use something I call the Morrison maneuver. The room fell silent. Everyone had heard rumors about the Morrison maneuver, a theoretical tactic that Jack had developed during his time at the academy. It had never been tested in real combat because most military experts considered it too dangerous to attempt. Commander Alex Turner, who had been studying the tactical data, looked up from his tablet with alarm. Sir, the Morrison maneuver requires our ships to use gravitational slingshots around asteroids to achieve impossible speeds. The computer models show that the G-forces alone could kill our crews before we even reach the enemy. Jack nodded grimly. That's exactly why it will work. The Zephyrians have studied our military tactics, but they've never seen anything like this because no reasonable commander would ever try it. Their sensors won't be able to track ships moving at those speeds, and their weapons won't be able to lock onto targets that are accelerating unpredictably. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Helen Foster stood up from her seat, her face pale with worry. Jack, you're talking about exposing our people to forces that could cause permanent brain damage. Even if our ships hold together, we might lose consciousness during the most critical part of the attack. The timing has to be perfect, added Lieutenant Commander Tony Baker from the communications station. If even one ship is off by a few seconds, the entire formation falls apart. We'd be flying blind into the middle of the enemy fleet with no coordination between our forces. Jack looked around the room at the faces of his officers. These were smart, experienced people who understood the risks better than anyone. They knew that what he was proposing was barely possible even under perfect conditions. With the stress of combat and the unpredictability of the Zephyrian response, it was almost certain to fail. I know what I'm asking, Jack said quietly. I know that most of you think this plan is crazy. You're probably right, but I need you to understand something. The Zephyrians have conquered 17 civilizations by being stronger, faster, and more advanced than their enemies. But they've never faced a species that would rather die trying something impossible than live as slaves. Captain Susan Bell's holographic image leaned forward. Jack, explain the details. How exactly does this maneuver work? Jack activated a more detailed display, showing the paths that each group of ships would take. The first group, led by Captain Martinez, will approach from the left flank. They'll use the gravity of 3 large asteroids to build up speed, then hit the enemy formation from the side. The Zephyrians will turn to face this threat, which is exactly what we want. That's when the second group attacks, asked Captain Roy Martinez. Right, Jack confirmed. Captain Bell will lead the second group in an attack from below. While the enemy is dealing with the first attack, the second group will use the gravity wells of different asteroids to approach from an unexpected angle. The Zephyrians will have to divide their attention between 2 threats. And the third group? Asked Commander Nina Rodriguez. Jack's expression grew more serious. The third group, including the Defiant, will execute the most dangerous part of the maneuver. We'll use the gravity of 3 asteroids simultaneously to create a slingshot, effect that will propel us directly at the heart of their formation. We'll be moving so fast that we'll only have seconds to target their command ships before we're past them. Dr. Helen Foster shook her head. Jack, the medical risks are enormous. At those speeds, even a small mistake could turn our ships into debris. And if our crews lose consciousness from the G-forces, we won't be able to control our vessels during the attack. That's why we're going to use the emergency medical protocols, Jack replied. Every crew member will be given stimulants to help them stay conscious, and we'll use the ship's artificial gravity systems to try to reduce the effects of acceleration. It's not perfect, but it's our best chance. Lieutenant Commander Tony Baker looked at his communication equipment with concern. Sir, coordinating 3 separate attack groups while they're moving at those speeds will be almost impossible. The signal delay alone could cause fatal timing errors. We'll use pre-programmed attack sequences, Jack explained. Each group will know exactly when to begin their approach, and we'll rely on the skill of our pilots to make the final adjustments. Once we commit to the maneuver, there will be no way to change the plan. The room was quiet for a long moment as everyone absorbed the details of what Jack was proposing. The plan was complex, dangerous, and depended on perfect timing and incredible luck. It was the kind of strategy that military academies would use as an example of what not to do in combat, but it was also completely unexpected. And that might be enough. Captain Roy Martinez was the first to speak. Jack, I've served with you for 10 years. I've seen you pull off miracles before. If you think this can work, then I'm with you. Captain Susan Bell nodded through the holographic link. My crew is ready. We didn't come this far to give up now. One by one, the other officers agreed to support the plan. They knew the risks, but they also knew that conventional tactics would lead to certain defeat. The Morrison maneuver was their only chance to surprise the Zephyrians and show them that humans could not be conquered. Jack felt the weight of command pressing down on him as he looked at the faces of his officers. In a few hours he would give the order that would either save humanity or destroy the Earth Defense Fleet. The quiet vow he had made to his family echoed in his mind as he prepared to lead his people into the most dangerous battle in human history. The Zephyrian fleet was approaching, confident in their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They expected to find a species that would surrender when faced with impossible odds. Instead, they were about to discover that some enemies could not be defeated. No matter how hopeless the situation seemed, Jack Morrison was ready to show them what human determination looked like. The space around the Kepler system exploded into chaos as the battle that would change galactic history began. Jack Morrison gripped the command chair of the UES, defiant as his ship accelerated toward the massive asteroid that would serve as their gravitational slingshot. Around him, the bridge crew fought to stay conscious as incredible forces pushed their bodies beyond normal limits. The Zephyrian fleet had arrived exactly as predicted, their 400 biomechanical ships moving in perfect formation through the darkness of space. The alien vessels were massive, each one the size of a small city, with hulls that pulsed with green organic light. At the center of the formation was the Dominator, the flagship of War Master Krex, a creature that had conquered more worlds than any other being in the galaxy. All ships report ready for Phase 1, announced Lieutenant Commander Lisa Stone from her position at the tactical station. Blood was trickling from her nose due to the G-forces, but her voice remained steady. Captain, Martinez is beginning his approach now. On the main display, Jack could see the first group of human ships led by Captain Roy Martinez in the Use Guardian. 12 vessels were using the gravity of 3 large asteroids to build up speed that should have been impossible for ships of their size. The human vessels streaked through space like bullets, their hulls glowing from the stress of acceleration. War Master Krex stood on the bridge of the Dominator, his 8-foot frame towering over the biomechanical control systems. His 4 arms moved with practiced precision as he studied the human attack through his enhanced neural implants. The Zephyrian commander had conquered 17 civilizations, and he had never seen tactics like this before. Increased defensive power, Krex commanded through the neural link that connected him to his fleet. These humans fight like creatures without reason. They will destroy themselves with these foolish maneuvers. But as the human ships reached incredible speeds, something unexpected happened. The Zephyrian targeting systems, designed to track conventionally moving vessels, began to have trouble locking onto the wildly accelerating human craft. The quantum phase weapons that had destroyed entire star systems struggled to hit targets that were moving in unpredictable patterns. Captain Roy Martinez felt his consciousness slipping as the G-forces threatened to knock him unconscious. The stimulants that Dr. Helen Foster had given them were helping, but barely. Through sheer force of will, he managed to give the order that began the first phase of the attack. "All ships, open fire on my mark," Roy gasped into his communication system. "Remember, we only get one chance at this." The first group of human ships smashed into the left flank of the Zephyrian formation like a hammer hitting glass. Plasma cannons fired at point-blank range into the biomechanical hulls of the alien vessels. The organic armor that had protected the Zephyrians from energy weapons for centuries began to crack and bleed under the kinetic impact of ships moving at impossible speeds. 3 human vessels were destroyed in the first few seconds of contact, their hulls unable to withstand the stress of the maneuver. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The Zephyrian fleet, which had never faced an enemy willing to use kamikaze tactics, began to turn to face this unexpected threat. "Phase 2, begin your approach," Jack ordered through the fleet communication system. Captain Susan Bell led the second group of 15 ships in an attack from below the Zephyrian formation. Her ship, the UES Thunderbolt, groaned under the stress as it used the gravity wells of different asteroids to approach from an angle that no Zephyrian sensor had been watching. "This is insane," muttered Chief Engineer Pete Adams from his position in the engine room of the Defiant. "The stress readings are off the charts. These ships weren't designed for this kind of punishment." But the human vessels held together through determination and luck. The second wave of attack caught the Zephyrians while they were still responding to the first assault. Susan Bell's ships emerged from the asteroid field like ghosts, appearing on sensors only seconds before they opened fire. The biomechanical hull of a Zephyrian cruiser began to smoke and bubble as human weapons found their mark. The organic armor that had seemed invincible began to show weakness when faced with attacks from multiple directions at speeds that defied all logic. War Master Krex felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. The humans were not fighting like any species he had ever encountered. They were sacrificing their own ships to damage his fleet, using tactics that seemed designed by madmen rather than military commanders. "All vessels, concentrate fire on the human ships," Krex ordered. "These creatures must be destroyed before they can do more damage." But it was too late. Jack Morrison had already begun the most dangerous part of his plan. "Third group, execute the final phase," Jack commanded. All ships ramming speed. The remaining 20 human vessels, including the Defiant, began the most incredible maneuver in the history of space combat. They used the gravitational pull of 3 asteroids simultaneously, creating a slingshot effect that propelled them directly toward the heart of the Zephyrian formation at speeds that should have been impossible. Jack felt his vision beginning to blur as the G-forces pushed his body to its limits. Around him, his crew fought to remain conscious as their ship accelerated beyond anything it was designed to handle. Commander Alex Turner, despite blood streaming from his ears, continued to coordinate targeting solutions. "Sir, we're approaching maximum velocity," Lisa Stone reported, her voice barely a whisper. "Hull stress is at critical levels." "Hold together for just a few more seconds," Jack replied, his own voice strained. "We're almost there." The Defiant and the other human ships in the third group streaked through space like meteors, their hulls glowing white-hot from friction and stress. Several vessels began to break apart under the incredible forces, but their crews maintained their positions even as their ships disintegrated. Around them, the Zephyrian fleet found itself facing an attack unlike anything in their military history. Ships were approaching from 3 different directions at speeds that made them nearly impossible to target. The biomechanical vessels that had conquered star systems were being hammered by kinetic impacts that their organic armor could not absorb. "Impossible," War Master Krex growled as he watched the human ships approach his flagship. No species would sacrifice so much for so little gain. But Jack Morrison was not thinking about gain or loss. He was thinking about his wife Kate and his daughter Emma, safe on Earth because he and his crew were willing to die to protect them. He was thinking about the 12 billion humans who deserved to live free rather than as slaves to alien conquerors. "All ships, target the enemy flagship," Jack ordered as the Defiant approached the massive bulk of the Dominator. "Show them what human determination looks like." The Defiant, followed by 6 other human vessels, smashed into the hull of the Zephyrian flagship at relativistic speeds. The biomechanical armor that had been designed to withstand energy weapons cracked and split under the kinetic force of ships. Moving faster than anything the Zephyrians had ever imagined, the massive alien vessel shuddered as human ships tore through its organic hull like bullets through paper. The living metal screamed as it died, and the neural networks that connected the ship to its crew began to fail. War Master. Krex felt his flagship dying around him as emergency alarms filled the bridge with their warning sounds. The humans had done something that should have been impossible. They had damaged a Zephyrian dreadnought using nothing but courage and ships that were inferior in every measurable way. "All vessels, retreat," Krex ordered, his voice filled with something he had never felt before: fear. "These humans are not like the others. They fight without regard for their own survival." But the retreat order came too late. The human attack had created a chain reaction throughout the Zephyrian fleet. Ships that had never known defeat were breaking apart under sustained assault from enemies who refused to surrender even when facing certain death. Jack Morrison watched from the bridge of his damaged ship as the mighty Zephyrian fleet began to fall apart. The biomechanical vessels that had conquered 17 civilizations were fleeing from a force less than 1/10 their size. The impossible had become reality through nothing more than human stubbornness and the willingness to sacrifice everything. For freedom, the Battle of Kepler system was over, and humanity had won. The medical bay of the rescue ship, UES Mercy, was filled with the sounds of machines keeping wounded heroes alive. Jack Morrison lay on a medical bed, his body covered with bruises and cuts from the battle that had saved humanity. The Morrison maneuver had worked, but the cost had been enormous. 23 ships destroyed, over 8,000 brave souls lost. But Earth was safe. Dr. Helen Foster moved between the beds, checking on the survivors of the impossible battle. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone who had been working for 36 hours straight, treating injuries that no medical textbook had ever described. The G-forces that the human crews had endured during the battle had pushed their bodies beyond normal limits. "How many made it?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse from the battle. "More than we expected," Dr. Foster replied, adjusting the medical scanner over his chest. "Captain Martinez is alive, but his ship was completely destroyed. Captain Bell's Thunderbolt made it through with heavy damage, and most of her crew survived. The final count is still coming in, but it looks like about 60% of our people made it home." Jack closed his eyes and felt the weight of those losses. Each number represented a person with a family, dreams, and hopes for the future. They had died so that billions of others could live free. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten, but it still hurt to know that his orders had sent them to their deaths. "Commander, you have visitors," said a medical technician, pointing toward the entrance of the bay. Admiral Grace Bennett walked into the medical bay, followed by several other high-ranking officers from Earth Command. Her gray hair was disheveled, and her uniform showed the wrinkles of someone who had not slept in days. But her eyes were bright with something Jack had not seen in weeks: hope. "Jack Morrison, you magnificent fool," Admiral Bennett said, her voice filled with emotion. "What you did out there should have been impossible. Every military expert in the galaxy said it couldn't work. The computer simulations showed certain failure, but somehow you pulled it off. We all pulled it off," Jack corrected. "Every person who flew into that battle knew they might not come home. They did it anyway because they believed in something bigger than themselves." Captain Lavara Hayes entered the medical bay, her arm in a sling from injuries sustained during the battle. Her ship had been part of the Mars defense grid, and she had watched the entire battle unfold on long-range sensors. The expression on her face was a mixture of amazement and respect. "The Federation Council is calling it the most significant military victory in galactic history," Lavra said. 3 species that were preparing to surrender to the Zephyrians have changed their minds. The Rigelian Empire has decided to fight back against Zephyrian expansion. Even the peaceful Aldebaranians are talking about forming a defense alliance." "Commander." Alex Turner appeared at Jack's bedside, his head wrapped in bandages but his eyes clear and alert. Despite his injuries, he had been coordinating the rescue operations and gathering intelligence about the aftermath of the battle. "Sir, we've been monitoring Zephyrian communications," Alex said. "Their entire military command structure is in chaos." Warmaster Krex survived the destruction of his flagship, but he's been stripped of his rank. The Zephyrian High Command is blaming him for the defeat. They're calling the Battle of Kepler system an impossible fluke. Is it over? Jack asked. Are they going to leave human space alone? Alex shook his head. Intelligence suggests they're already planning a larger attack. The defeat has made humanity their primary target. They want revenge for the humiliation we caused them. Jack struggled to sit up in his medical bed, ignoring the protests from Dr. Foster. The victory at Kepler system had been just the beginning, not the end. The Zephyrians would return with more ships, better tactics, and a burning desire to prove that their defeat had been nothing but luck. Then we'll be ready for them? Jack said firmly. Today we proved that human determination can overcome impossible odds. Tomorrow we'll teach the rest of the galaxy that freedom is worth fighting for. A communication screen activated near Jack's bed, and the face of his wife Kate appeared. She was sitting in their kitchen on Earth, tears streaming down her cheeks, as she saw her husband alive. Behind her, their daughter Emma held a sign that read, "Welcome home, Dad," in bright crayon letters. Jack, the whole world has been watching the news reports, Kate said, her voice breaking with emotion. They're calling you the hero who saved humanity. Emma hasn't stopped talking about how her daddy fought the monsters in space. Jack felt his own eyes filling with tears as he looked at his family. The quiet vow he had made before the battle had been fulfilled. His wife and daughter were safe because thousands of brave men and women had been willing to sacrifice everything. For their freedom, I love you both, Jack said. I'll be home soon. Daddy, did you really make the bad aliens go away? Emma asked, her 12-year-old voice filled with curiosity and pride. We made them think twice about coming back, Jack replied. But Emma, the real heroes are all the people who helped me. Captain Martinez, Captain Bell, and thousands of others who were braver than they had any right to be. After the communication ended, Jack lay back in his medical bed and thought about what the victory meant. The Battle of Kepler system had changed everything. For the first time in galactic history, a species had defeated the Zephyrians through pure determination and the willingness to try the impossible. News of the victory was spreading throughout human space, inspiring a new generation of defenders. Young people who had never thought about joining the military were signing up to serve. Scientists were working around the clock to develop new weapons and tactics based on the lessons learned from the Morrison maneuver. The entire human species had been energized by the proof that they could stand against any enemy. Sir, there's something else you should know, Commander Alex Turner said quietly. The Morrison maneuver is being studied by military academies throughout the Federation. They want to understand how we achieved what their computer models said was impossible. What did they find? Jack asked. They found that the key wasn't the tactics or the technology, Alex replied. It was the willingness of human crews to push themselves beyond normal limits. No other species in the galaxy would have attempted what we did because the risk of death was too high. But humans didn't. See it as a risk, we saw it as the price of freedom. Jack nodded, understanding what Alex meant. The Morrison maneuver had worked not because it was a brilliant tactical innovation, but because it required something that could not be programmed into computers or taught in military schools. It required the kind of stubborn courage that seemed to be built into the human heart. Dr. Helen Foster returned to Jack's bedside with the final medical reports. You're going to make a full recovery, Commander. The physical damage will heal in a few weeks. But I want you to understand something important. What you and your people did out there changed medicine as well as military history. We learned that the human body can survive forces that we thought were fatal. We discovered that determination can overcome biological limitations. As the hours passed, more reports came in about the effects of the victory. The Zephyrian Empire was experiencing internal conflicts as different factions blamed each other for the defeat. Several of their conquered worlds were attempting to rebel, inspired by humanity's example. The entire balance of power in the galaxy was shifting because a small human fleet had refused to accept defeat. Jack, looked out through the medical bay's window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Zephyrians were planning their revenge. They would return with a larger fleet and better preparation, but they would find humanity ready for them. The species that had once been seen as weak newcomers to the galaxy had proven that they possessed something more valuable than advanced technology or superior numbers. They possessed the willingness to fight for their beliefs even when victory seemed impossible. They had shown the galaxy that some things were worth dying for, and that freedom could not be conquered as long as people were willing to defend it. Jack Morrison's quiet vow had been fulfilled, but it had become something larger than a personal promise. It had become a declaration that humanity would never surrender, never give up, and never stop fighting for the right to determine their own destiny. The Battle of Kepler system was over, but the war for galactic freedom had just begun, and humanity was ready to lead that fight.